Okay, I want you to picture this. It's a pitch black, rain slicked night in the ancient capital of Kyoto. The year is 1858. The air is incredibly thick with tension, and the narrow, winding streets completely deserted. You literally can't hear anything but the freezing rain falling on the wooden rooftops. Until suddenly, the silence is absolutely shattered. There's this sudden, violent crash. The secret police of the shogun, who was basically Japan's supreme military dictator, kick down the wooden door of a small, totally unassuming house. They storm inside, grab a solitary middle-aged scholar who had just been quietly reading by candlelight, and violently drag him out into the freezing mud. Now, as we'll see in this explainer, this midnight raid wasn't just some random arrest. Not at all. This was the very first capture in what history calls the Ansei Purge. It was a massive, ruthless, nationwide crackdown by the ruling government against any and all political rebels. This exact moment in the reign, it officially kicked off one of the bloodiest and most transformative chapters in all of Japanese history. But right away, we run into a massive mystery, right? I mean, why him? Why was this specific guy, Umeda Unpin, an impoverished intellectual with literally no army, zero formal political power, and barely enough money to eat, why was he the shogun's most wanted man? How on earth did a quiet, broke scholar become the single most dangerous man in all of Japan? To figure that out, we actually need to rewind the clock a bit. You see, Umeda Unpin wasn't born a revolutionary. Born in 1815 in a coastal Japanese province called Obama, he was a brilliant, highly respected, but incredibly poor scholar of ancient philosophy. For a long time, his life was just quiet. He spent his early years buried in books, teaching ethics, loyalty, and duty, but the world outside his window was about to turn completely upside down. So here's the crucial context. Japan had been completely isolated from the rest of the world for over 2 centuries. But suddenly, terrifying news started hitting their shores. First, the Opium War in the 1840s completely shocked Asia. Then, in 1853, American Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with these giant, smoke-belching, heavily armed black ships, demanding Japan open its ports. And if that wasn't enough, just a year later, a Russian fleet showed up right in Osaka Bay. The entire country was gripped by sheer, unprecedented panic. Unpin looked at these massive foreign warships and realized something terrifying. His country was completely defenseless. He felt this deep, burning moral obligation to do something. So he wrote a passionate, urgent letter to his local feudal lord, his regional boss, basically, warning him that they needed to immediately build up their coastal defenses. But, well, his lord didn't exactly appreciate a poor scholar telling him how to run the government. Unpin's harsh critique deeply angered the people in charge. And the fallout was brutal. Unpin was fired. He was formally stripped of his samurai status and exiled from his clan. He became a ronin, a masterless samurai. Now, in the incredibly rigid society of Edo-era Japan, losing your class status meant losing everything. It was basically a social death sentence. Overnight, Unpin plunged himself and his family into the most crushing, desperate poverty you can imagine. His daily reality became an absolute nightmare. His wife fell deathly ill with tuberculosis. His children were literally starving. And yet when the Russian fleet arrived in 1854, Unpin wrote a heartbreaking poem. It goes, "Wife is sick in bed, children cry from hunger. I will face the foreign enemy." He actually left his starving family behind, truly believing that if the country fell, his family was doomed anyway. It's just a devastating, unimaginable sacrifice for his ideals. From this moment of ultimate heartbreak, the whole pace of Unpin's life shifts into overdrive. He completely abandons the academic world. The exiled scholar vanishes into the shadows of Kyoto and Osaka and transforms himself into a fast-moving, high-stakes revolutionary mastermind. It's like something out of a spy thriller. And the way he did it was just brilliant. I mean, you can't start a revolution without money and communication, right? So what did he do? He set up a super boring, mundane trading business. On the surface, he was just a merchant moving salt, wax, and paper into Kyoto. But this was the perfect cover, because beneath the salt and paper, he was secretly funneling massive amounts of untraceable cash, weapons, and coded intelligence to rebel factions all over the country. Using this fake merchant network, Unpin became the spider in the center of a massive underground web. He managed to unite scattered, totally disorganized loyalist groups into one cohesive, massive threat. He backed a powerful political faction in a shadow war over who should be the next shogun. He even managed to influence a secret decree directly from the emperor himself, which basically defied the government's treaties with foreign powers. So now we have this incredible, explosive clash. On one side, you've got the shogunate, the ruling government, desperately trying to maintain law and order and signing treaties just to avoid a war with foreign empires that they know for a fact they cannot win. On the other side, you have the rising revolutionaries, orchestrated by Unpin, who believe these treaties are a humiliating surrender and want to overthrow the government to protect the nation's pride. Which snaps us right back to our opening scene. September 1858. The shogunate finally realizes exactly who is pulling the strings, and they strike back. Unpin is dragged out into the freezing rain, and in a crazy, cruel twist of fate, the man in charge of the secret police in Kyoto, the very man who ordered his arrest, is none other than his old feudal lord, the exact same guy who fired and exiled Unpin years ago. Unpin is thrown into a cold, damp, stone prison in Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo. The government is desperate. They need names. They need to know who the other rebel leaders are, where the dark money is coming from, and how the network operates. And to get that info, they use heavy, terrifyingly brutal bamboo whips. The sharp crack of the bamboo echoes through the prison, day after day. But despite the endless, unimaginable torture, we arrive at this number, 0. That is the exact number of comrades' names Umeda Unpin betrayed. 0. His body was being systematically destroyed, his health was rapidly failing, but he did not give the secret police a single piece of actionable intelligence. Whenever his interrogators demanded names, he would literally just look at them through the pane and say, "I will only speak of the great cause." He would actually lecture his torturers on philosophy, on duty, and on defending the nation. His physical body was completely broken, sure, but his spirit, it was entirely bulletproof. He simply refused to yield. Finally, though, the physical toll became too much. In October 1859, at just 45 years old, Umeda Unpin died quietly in his cold, dark cell. The official government cause of death was disease, a mix of cholera and beriberi. But let's be real, the severe wounds from his torture were undoubtedly the true catalyst. It was a brilliant mind, extinguished in the dark. But before he died, he left behind a final death poem. It translates roughly to, "I never thought my body would matter, with my heart so single-mindedly devoted to the emperor's reign." It's such a moving, tragic illustration of his ultimate sacrifice. He never cared about wealth or status or even his own physical survival. He only cared about the ideals he was leaving behind. And those ideals, they changed literally everything. Because Unpin stayed silent through the torture, he directly protected a whole new generation of revolutionaries, future leaders who would carry the torch forward. Unpin's tragic death as the very first victim of the Ansei Purge sent absolute shockwaves through the country. It outraged the youth, it united the fractured rebellion, and it became the direct catalyst that would, just a few years later, topple a 260-year-old government entirely. Which leaves us with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. Umeda Unpin lost his job, he lost his family to poverty, and ultimately lost his own life in a dark, cold cell without ever seeing the revolution he started actually happen. But his silence built a new nation. So ask yourself, can an idea survive the death of the one who sparked it? And when you look at the heavy, heavy cost of revolution, what would you be willing to sacrifice for what you truly believe in?